They called security on her at her own wedding. Not because there was a fight. Not because she was late. Not because there was a mistake with the guest list. They called security because a black woman in a wedding dress was standing at the entrance of a private venue, and someone decided she didn't belong there. She stood under an arch of white roses, music drifting softly from inside, while a man with an earpiece blocked her path and asked for her name again, slower this time, as if pronunciation might fix the problem. She said it calmly. He checked the tablet. He frowned. He said there must be a misunderstanding and asked her to step aside so she wouldn't interrupt the arriving guests. She told him she was the bride. He didn't laugh. He didn't apologize. He pressed the radio on his shoulder and asked for backup. And before we go any further, let me ask you something. Who are you? And where are you listening from right now? What city? What country? Leave it in the comments so we know we're not alone. And if stories about real injustice, quiet strength, and long overdue consequences matter to you, take a second right now to subscribe to the channel and like this video, because what happens next only makes sense if you stay until the end. The bride didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She didn't demand to see a manager. She had learned a long time ago that volume is often used against women who look like her. She had learned to stay composed even when her heart was racing. This wedding had taken 2 years to plan, not because of extravagance, but because she believed in doing things deliberately. She had paid for more than half of it herself, quietly, without announcements, without asking permission. The venue was exclusive, the kind of place that marketed itself as discreet and traditional, the kind of place where membership passed through families like heirlooms. Her fiancé loved it because he had grown up attending events there. She had agreed because she believed love meant meeting in the middle. What she hadn't known then was how many people saw her presence as temporary, conditional, or cosmetic. Inside, guests were sipping champagne. Outside, the bride was being asked to wait by the service driveway. The explanation shifted every few seconds. First it was protocol. Then it was security policy. Then it was a private event rule. Someone suggested she must be staff who wandered into the wrong area. Someone else said the real bride would arrive soon. And then the mother of the groom appeared, not rushing, not concerned, but composed in the way people are when they believe they are in control. She spoke to the manager in a low voice and gestured toward the bride without ever looking directly at her. Whatever she said worked, because the manager nodded and turned back with a tight smile and told the bride there had been a complaint, and until things were clarified, it would be best if she waited off the property. The word best hung in the air like a threat wrapped in politeness. The bride asked one question, just one. Who made the complaint? No one answered. Another guard arrived. A third. Guests began to notice. Phones came out. Whispers traveled faster than the music inside. The bride could feel it happening, that familiar shrinking sensation, the moment where dignity is tested not by how loudly you respond, but by whether you are allowed to exist at all. She realized then that they weren't seeing a bride. They were seeing a disruption, something to be managed, something to be removed. She reached into her clutch and turned on her phone's recorder, not to post, not to threaten, but because instinct told her that moments like this had a way of being rewritten later. When her fiancé finally came outside, confusion turned into disbelief in real time. He asked why she was standing there alone. He asked why security was surrounding her. He listened. And then, for the first time that day, he did something that made the air change. He stood next to her, not in front of her, not behind her. Next to her. He told them she wasn't going anywhere. The manager hesitated. The guards hesitated. And then someone asked the question that should have been asked at the beginning. Whose name is on the contract? Silence followed. Real silence. The kind that signals a shift. Because the answer wasn't the family name everyone expected. The contract, the deposit, the liability coverage, the donor credit that had funded the venue's last renovation. All of it traced back to the same person they were trying to escort off the property, the bride. And in that moment, the story they had been telling themselves collapsed. Faces changed. Voices softened. Apologies began forming too late. But the damage had already been done, and consequences, once set in motion, don't need shouting to arrive. What happened next wasn't loud, and it wasn't cruel, and it wasn't filmed for satisfaction. It was quiet, controlled, and devastating in its restraint. The bride didn't demand anyone be fired on the spot. She didn't threaten lawsuits or raise her voice. She simply said the wedding would continue as planned, but some people would no longer be part of it. The words were delivered evenly, without emotion, which somehow made them heavier. The manager understood immediately. So did the guards. So did the groom's mother, whose expression finally cracked, not into remorse, but into fear. She tried to speak, tried to explain that there had been a misunderstanding, that things had moved too fast, that she was only trying to protect the event. But protection for some has always come at the expense of others. The family members who had nodded along earlier were quietly asked to leave. Membership reviews were mentioned. Policies were referenced. The kind of institutional language that sounds harmless until it starts applying to you. The ceremony went on. Vows were exchanged. Guests clapped a little louder than planned, as if trying to overwrite what they had just witnessed. The bride smiled in photos. She danced. She thanked people, and yet something fundamental had shifted. Not broken, but clarified. In the weeks that followed, the venue issued a statement. Not because she demanded one, but because a recording surfaced from another angle, posted by a guest who couldn't shake what they had seen. The clip didn't go viral overnight. It spread slowly, the way uncomfortable truths often do, picked up by people who recognized the tone, the pattern, the familiarity of being questioned without cause. The venue lost partnerships. Sponsors asked questions. Longtime members distanced themselves. The groom's family reached out, cautiously at first, then desperately, suggesting conversations, healing, moving forward. The bride listened once, then declined. Not out of bitterness, but clarity. Access, she understood now, is not an entitlement. It is a privilege shaped by behavior. And some doors, once closed, are meant to stay that way. Life moved forward. The marriage grew stronger, not because the incident had been forgotten, but because it had been faced. The groom learned what standing beside someone truly costs. The bride learned she never needed permission to belong in spaces she helped build. And when asked later how she stayed so calm, she gave an answer that stayed with everyone who heard it. She said that panic is what systems rely on. Composure is what exposes them. Years later, when the story was retold, people often focused on the twist, the contract, the power reversal. But that wasn't the real point. The real point was that dignity had been tested in public and upheld without spectacle. That injustice had been met not with chaos, but with consequence. That a woman had been reduced to a problem and responded by becoming a boundary. And if there is one thing this story leaves us with, it's this. They didn't just call security on her wedding day. They revealed exactly who they were, and in doing so, lost access to someone they never deserved in the first place. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been questioned, minimized, or made to feel like you didn't belong where you absolutely did, take a moment now to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more stories like this to light. Stories where quiet strength outlasts loud prejudice, and where justice doesn't need to shout to be heard.